Despite that strong outlook for trade, Singapore companies say they are struggling with cash flow as orders get delayed and customers miss their payments. They have voiced these concerns to the Singapore Economic Resilience Task Force chaired by Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim Yong. Local firms are facing uncertainty over the precise effects of US tariffs and more largely the slowdown in the global economy. Mr. Gan says the task force is keeping a close eye on local firms and will roll out support measures if they think they're necessary. Nasha Rohim tells us more.
To cope with the uncertainties from US tariffs, the Singapore Economic Resilience Task Force is working on strengthening regional partnerships. The move aims to help firms diversify their supply chains and enter new markets. Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim Yong says negotiations to upgrade a free trade agreement between ASEAN members will conclude by the end of May. The deal will cover areas like standardizing customs clearance. This paves the way for a smoother process.
Even areas like rules of origin, how do we account for rules of origin, what are the processes involved? These are not necessarily tariffs, but it is important for us to iron out, to simplify and to reduce the compliance burden for the company. This way we can then reduce the cost of trading, and for companies who are trading heavily within ASEAN will benefit from this simplification.
Another key area that Mr. Gan touched on is the pharmaceutical sector. Now, this pharmaceutical sector is one of Singapore's most important exports to the US. And even though the US has yet to impose any tariffs on this sector, they did indicate that they might. Bilateral talks are ongoing, but it might take time before any details can be shared.
Both Singapore and US can sit down and discuss some form of a concession for Singapore to have a beneficial or preferential tariff, even to the extent of a zero tariff for pharmaceutical exports to the US. You will require some efforts on the Singapore side to ensure that the supply chain for this pharmaceutical is secured. And these are the details that we are discussing.
Mr. Gan also added that the US-China agreement on lower tariffs is a good sign, but there's still uncertainty.
What will happen at the end of 90 days is still a big question mark. It's yet to be known, and whether the negotiation with the other countries will progress smoothly, whether they will eventually settle at a level that are mutually agreeable and workable is something that is still yet to be seen. The discussion between China and US, of course, is right at the beginning, is a starting point. I think the journey will be quite long.
As for fresh graduates seeking employment, Mr. Gan advised that they stay flexible in their salary expectations and jobs during this time. He adds that the task force will work on internship opportunities for new job seekers.
To look at this long journey on tariff negotiations, not just with Singapore and the US, but the US and the rest of the world. We take a closer look with Jayant Menon. He's visiting senior fellow at the Regional Economic Studies Program at the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. He joins us from Manila. Dr. Menon, we just heard from DPM Gan Kim Yong there. Now, Singapore, more than 10% of our exports to the United States is made up of pharmaceuticals. Is that why we're putting so much priority in it? We have not had tariffs on pharma yet, although the warning, Mr. Trump has given due warning, that might happen in 2 weeks.
Right, yes. So I think the starting point is what you've just mentioned, which is that pharmaceutical exports to the US are a very important part of Singapore's overall trade, and so this is an important sector in this uncertain trading environment. The question now, I think, is whether the US goes ahead with the sectoral deal on pharmaceuticals, which wants to onshore a lot of these sorts of things. There could be quite significant tariffs coming up. And I think to guard against that, the minister is keen to try and secure a deal. 10% seems to be, the minimum now. But if you can get anything below that, I think this would certainly ensured that this important share of exports is in some way quarantined in this very uncertain trade environment.
Dr. Menon, Mr. Gunn has said to the extent of zero tariffs for pharmaceuticals, that would amount to an exemption for Singapore. And he has said this will require, and I quote him, some efforts on the Singapore side to ensure that the supply chain for this pharmaceutical is secure. What does Mr. Gunn mean? And how is this a matter of convincing the United States, or convincing who?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know exactly what it means. I can't read his mind. But from how I see it, I think what he's trying to get at is that, at the moment, unless some special arrangement is arrived at, 10% is the base case. So if you want something better than that, especially an exemption, brings it down to zero, then I think a special deal is required. Even though Singapore has a free trade agreement with the US, mind you, one of the few countries in this region with an FTA with the US. In terms of what he means by a secure supply chain, this is the new lingo. Everyone's talking about securing supply chains. Pharmaceuticals is not as sensitive a sector as, say, semiconductors, where there's concerns about dual use technologies, the use of the chips, the super chips for military purposes and so on. That's a whole separate set of complicated issues. The same concerns don't apply to pharmaceuticals. But nevertheless, as we saw during COVID, access to drugs and all the PPEs and so on, it can be very important. And it's useful to be trading with a trusted partner with high quality and safety standards. And Singapore clearly meets that criteria.
All right, Singapore, when it goes into talks like these, any lessons it has learned from all the back and forth we've seen on reciprocal tariffs, on baseline tariffs, on sectoral tariffs, steel, aluminium, the fact that some people, we've seen that pause between the US and China, we have other countries making less of a headway, that deal between the US and the UK. What lessons have we learned in just the last few weeks?
I think the takeaways from all of this turmoil is that there's going to be a long and winding road from here on before we can actually land safely on a deal which secures predictable and reliable set of rules on which to conduct trade with the US. I think that's the main takeaway. There's been too many, as you've correctly pointed out, too many exemptions and pauses and then turnarounds as well to really feel confident right now about where we're heading. A lot of uncertainty. I think the US must try very hard to be assuring its trading partners that it's serious about the deals it makes and it will remain committed to whatever is agreed. We've seen them tear up the USMCA with Canada and Mexico, a deal that Trump actually called the best deal ever because he was involved and he tore it up. So, the trust factor is lacking right now. Demonstrated by the chaos over the last few months. That needs to come back if you're going to go forward with the US as an important trading and reliable and important trading partner.
I trust also that any deal that is signed stays in place. Thanks for that, Dr. Jayant Menon, visiting senior fellow at the Regional Economic Studies Program at IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. Thank you.